Recent discoveries in the Baltic Sea have escalated concerns about Russia's hybrid warfare tactics. Finnish investigators identified drag marks linked to a suspected Russia-connected vessel following significant damage to undersea power and data cables. These incidents raise urgent questions about the limits of provocation and NATO's readiness to respond. Joining us today on TVP World to unpack the military and strategic stakes is Ben Hodges, the former commander of U.S. Army Europe and Africa. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you for the privilege.
So can you help us understand how significant is the damage to the Baltic Sea cable from a strategic and security level?
Well, the significance of the damage is not that great. It can be repaired. What is significant is that it has been damaged as part of a continuing series of actions by Russian vessels that are not clearly identified as Russian Navy, but there's no doubt that this is Russian-directed, Russian-related activity. And it's being done in such a way that causes damage to lots of our communications and energy infrastructure. But this is what Russia does. Until they get punched in the nose, until we make them stop, they will continue doing this. And it only gets worse until we act.
And would you mark this incident as a clear escalation in Russia's hybrid attack against NATO allies?
Actually, I don't like the use of the word hybrid because it kind of puts it in sort of a squishy category. You know, the Russians don't think, hey, we're going to do a hybrid thing or we're going to do a real thing or we're not or whatever. They're always at war. It just depends on what they're trying to achieve, what part of the spectrum of capability they use. So until we get in the same mindset and treat what they do as acts of war, and then get the right policies in place, get the right laws in place, and have tangible, painful repercussions for the Russians, they're going to continue doing this. You know, instead, what we get are, oh, we're very concerned, or we need to examine this. You know, the Finns got it right. They went out and seized this ship, and that's what we all need to be doing.
All right, and I think you aptly pointed out that perhaps the term hybrid is sort of the West's response kind of to try to somehow not escalate the tensions, but perhaps Russia's already taking this as a consideration as a different mindset. Where do you think NATO should start drawing the line between provocations and blatantly active war?
I think we should do exactly what Finland did. We should make it clear to the Russians that any time there's an accident like this, we are going to impound the vessel that was involved. And we should be doing the same thing with these ships, the so-called shadow fleet that's carrying illegal oil out through the Baltic Sea. Denmark has talked about perhaps stopping ships, checking them for the insurance, checking them for compliance with the sanctions. These are the kind of actions that we should be doing. And these are all completely within the international law. That's what we should be doing. And quit worrying all the time what Russia might do if we enforce the law. They should be worried about what we're doing instead of us always worrying about what they're doing. There's nothing they can do to escalate. They're not going to use a nuclear weapon over this. They're going to threaten. They're going to complain. But at the end of the day, you see that Finland, the newest member of NATO, is the first one that really went out and did something. This is where I think all of our allies in the Baltic Sea, including Poland, need to be much more forceful in protecting infrastructure, enforcing international law, and don't allow Russia to get away with what they've been doing.
All right, I think I see the situation as Russia keep provoking these Western nations and poking and getting into our faces. But like I mentioned, until someone actually punches them in the face, well, they're just stopping just short of this outright, aggressive action. So at what point do you think the leaders from Baltic countries will actually make that decision to send a stronger message and say that, okay, this is enough?
I hope they're doing it right now. I saw today that the Latvian prime minister, I think, has talked about seizing ships that do things like this in Latvian waters. Denmark has talked about increasing their efforts to stop Russian the Shadow Fleet vessels. Finland has already taken a step. So I think nations realize that Russia really can't do anything about it. And so we should not be scared that they might somehow escalate something if we impound one of their ships and hold it for an investigation. I mean, do it that way until they stop destroying infrastructure. And we need to think about these incidents not as random, where somebody says, hey, let's go try the destroyer cable thing. These are all designed to weaken our ability to monitor what's going on, to communicate with each other. And it would be part of a long-term preparation if they were ever going to attack a NATO country or do something else in the region, then destroying our communications infrastructure or our power generation or our energy infrastructure. These are the kind of things that they would do.
Would you go as far as categorize these Russian shadow fleet to be treated as military threats rather than just commercial entities at this point?
Well, the reason they're important is because this is how Russia pays for its war against Ukraine and everything else that it's doing. This is the only income Russia really has is from the sale of this oil that goes to India and China and a few other countries, including some European countries. So if you stop the sale, their ability to export illegally in violation of sanctions, if you stop that, that has a dramatic impact. It's even more important than providing ammunition to Ukraine is choking Russia's ability to generate money to pay for ammunition that it gets from North Korea and Iran and China. So this is exactly what we should have done this 2 years ago, is cut off their ability to export oil and gas to China and India.
And coming back to the NATO's response, do you think if NATO fails to kind of take a forceful action to what just happened, it might embolden further Russian aggression?
Of course. I mean, they must laugh at us sometimes when we wring our hands and have huge debates about, oh my God, what should we do? And then they just, plan the next operation. So I think that we have got to understand what it is they're doing. These are acts of war. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to go launch missiles. It doesn't require that at all. We can use the same means that they're using, except we would be the ones enforcing the law. We would be the ones acting in accordance with the law of the seas. We would be the ones acting in accordance with international law, enforcing sanctions. So I don't know why we are continued to be so scared. Now, it could be there are some nations, whether it's inside the European Union or inside the alliance, that will be embarrassed because they will be exposed as countries that are also importing Russian oil and gas or have some other arrangements, and it'll probably be a little bit embarrassing. So if nothing else, at least countries in the Baltic region, for example, could work together to protect critical infrastructure and enforce sanctions.
All right. Recently, there's a lot of talks about the war in Ukraine eventually winding down and peace negotiations going on. But do you think that these sort of attack will stop just because the war in Ukraine ended? Or do you fear that Western nations might be a little bit complacent for having closed this chapter and could have kind of like put it behind their minds?
Yeah, Russia only stops doing this when they get stopped. Of course, they'll continue to do this because they know that traditionally the West, we lose interest, we turn it back. Oh, thank God we have a peace treaty now, or we have a ceasefire. Now we can focus on something else. They know that we don't stay focused on these things. And so they'll just wait a little while and pick it back up. I have to say, though, while I'm uncertain about what the Trump administration actually plans to do in Ukraine, there have been a lot of mixed signals out there. I'm not so sure they're going to just turn their back on Ukraine as I thought a few months ago. But I think the Ukrainians know that there is no way they should sign any kind of or they should accept any kind of negotiated outcome where they have to give up land or where there's not a security guarantee, because the Russians have never, ever respected any of these kind of agreements unless there was a strong force that compelled them to. The Ukrainians know that. And so I think shame on us that we have not done everything that we could to help Ukraine win. It's in our interest. This is not charity for Ukraine. This is in our strategic interest. And I think we are going to rue the day that we allowed Russia to continue doing what it's doing now while we still have a chance to actually help Ukraine defeat Russia.
Right, and I think by the actions that Russians are doing right now probably reflects what you're talking about. In the meantime, thank you so much for breaking all of this down for us. I really appreciate your input and insight. Thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you for the privilege.
Cheers. And thank you for watching this edition of World News Tonight. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.